This is an excerpt from a larger interview with Andrew Barta, the creator of Tech21 and the SansAmp. For the full interview, please see the details listed down below. We talk about Tech21, the creation of the GED-2112, and the release of the YYZ. Can you tell us the process of how the unit came to be? And you've already mentioned that Geddy approached you. How did it go from there?
Well, at the time, Tom Rogers, our artist relation guy, he recommended Geddy to try the RBI because Geddy was looking for more bass-oriented product, and at the time he was using the PSA, which is actually covers bass and guitar. It's a PSA stands for programmable SansAmp, and it's programmable so you can set up bass sounds and also guitar sounds. And but it doesn't have facilities like the RBI had, which is the mix facility to get the direct sound mixed together with the amp sound, which gives you like a more powerful bass sound, as you know. It's more layered. Mm-hmm. So Time recommended the RBI, and then later on, when we had the RPM, which is a parametric EQ combined with the SansAmp, then Geddy started to use that. And he used it for, I guess it's about 18 years now, something like that. I have to look at the numbers, but it was the early 2000s that he started to use our product, and he basically got rid of all amps, so he just went direct, and as you know, famously using like washing machines behind his back or a grill with chickens on it. And the chickens got cooked by the end of the show, so you had something to eat. Geddy has a very interesting sense of humor, I would compare it to actually a little bit to like a British sense of humor, like really a little bit offbeat. He likes to do those things, wacky, Mm-hmm. And so with this direct sound, like he was able to put whatever they wanted behind him, as a stage setup, and I think that makes him also very unique. But the main reason he was doing this because they were in 100% control of the sound. From venue to venue, they were able to get the sound exactly the same. There were no problems with, the room being different or the amplifier not working correctly. And I think that was the main reason. And the other reason I talked to him personally about this is that he has to do a lot of things. He has to sing. He has to play keyboards. He has to play bass pedal and remember the lyrics same time. So he doesn't have time to try to adjust something on the amplifier and worry about how the sound is. So he has in-ear monitors, and he has a tech who sets everything up for him so he can concentrate solely on the performance and not the technical aspects of playing in a live show. And that's why this was essential for him to have a direct sound that is reliable, but it also gives you the dynamics of an amplifier. Because as you know, when you plug in a bass directly to a mixer, it's a kind of a dead sound. Yeah. I always compare this. I have philosophies on designing, and one of my philosophies is that, like, for example, a stand-up bass took hundreds of years to develop, okay? And believe it or not, that big body of the stand-up bass, that's an equalizer, okay? You can look at it as an equalizer. With a tweeter, the F-holes are actually a tweeters. So what you have is really a mechanical box that amplifies your sound, but not flatly. People are in misbelief that a bass has to be amplified flat. You need a perfectly flat sound, and that's when you have a good bass sound. And that's not true. Because if you look at the stand-up bass, it has a resonant frequency at the low end. And then, as I said, the F-holes also amplifies the high end. So you have actually a scoop sound. And why do you have a scoop sound? Because you have to fit the other instruments between, right? For example, a human vocal, that's a mid-range instrument. A guitar is a mid-range instrument. So the bass has to leave space for these other instruments. So if you look at any guy who is like a famous guy mixing bands, they understand this principle. So they mix the band to leave these spaces for the other instruments so they don't cover the other one. For example, one of the most difficult one is the snare drum and guitar because they in a similar frequency range. They can wash,
The
and the
harmonics.
cymbals
Yeah.
too. There's like basically white noise. They can wash each other out. So you need to equalize them in a way, and many times it's actually not an EQ. It's just the positioning of the microphones, or like how you record something. But you find those spaces, so now you can have. It's like the color of the rainbow. All the instruments you find in their respective place, and obviously, believe it or not, actually the bass is not on the bottom. The kick drum is on the bottom.
Yeah, that's the foundation of all of the band is the kick drum. Yeah.
Exactly, because the kick drum has a pitch that is barely recognizable as a frequency, is more recognizable as a thump, like a very low end. You feel it with your stomach. You're not hearing it, you're feeling it, right?
Yeah.
But the bass is actually has a pitch recognizable frequency, okay? And then you have all the other instruments. But this is all a philosophy. So when I created the SansAmp, I kept this philosophy in hand of designing, and I looked at cabinets, because bass cabinets do exactly what a stand-up bass body does. They equalize naturally. And interestingly enough, they also have a huge roll-off, like under like sometimes 30, sometimes 40 hertz, and that leaves room for the kick drum, okay? Because I heard sometimes mixes that people mix all the very low frequencies of the bass, and then it just interacts with the kick drum in a bad way, not in a good way. So you have to like figure that out correctly. And actually, when we developed a pedal with Doug Pinnick, that was one of the big things, because he uses the bass detuned to C sharp. Okay, so he has very low frequencies.
Very low.
But he told us that his soundman actually neuters his sound, meaning of cuts some of that low end off to leave room for the kick drum. Okay? So many times what you hear is actually the first harmonic of that low string. People don't realize this, that most bass cabinets don't actually, they're not able to transmit like a low B. What you hear is the first harmonic, okay? But it's give you that interesting feeling of that very low note, but that's not what you're actually hearing.
No, that's not the full representation.
Yeah, exactly. So, but getting back to that, so the cabinet, an integral part of a good bass sound, okay? It's actually part of your instrument. People think that a bass is a bass and that's your instrument. No. The amp,
that's just the beginning.
exactly. The amp is the other part of your instrument. So without the amp, you don't have a bass sound. Yes, you hear notes, but it's not the bass sound you hear on a Beatle record or on a Who record. That's all the amp that you hear. And it's so funny that people for years said that bass should be clean, pristine clean. But you listen to a Beatles recording, especially if you can get ISO tracks, you recognize that it's distorted because they have strength, but that's what gives you that cool sound. And that's what I always wanted to put into our product, and that's why the SansAmp became what it is, because you always had that control of being able to go to just the limit when it starts to get like overdriven, and it gives you extra harmonics, but it also gives you that dynamic feeling of an amp being driven. And that's the secret to the SansAmp, basically.
I know Geddy wanted his, I guess, the sound of a speaker cabinet, so he came to you. Did he come to you with a characteristic of another sound, or was there anything else that was part of his brief?
No, it's actually worked backwards, because we designed already the RBI and the RPM, and we was 100% happy with that. So the only thing we did with the new product that his name on it is he has a tech. His name is John McIntosh, but everybody calls him Scully. And he is the one who sets up Geddy's sound. And they had a huge rack. I saw them many times, backstage before shows, and we were talking about equipment and everything. And Scully was expressing that, he had this idea to compress all this equipment down to like a single rack space, because everything is available, especially with modern technology. So when we started to design the 2112, basically we started out with an existing product, which was at the time the RPM, the parametric EQ. But Scully was very clear about that. They run 3, sometimes 4 channels for Geddy. So one was the RPM. The other one was like a clean DI sound, but had a slight EQ curve to it. I usually don't like to mention other companies' name, but it was not our company. So it's had like a built-in actual speaker simulation, and it could slightly be, saturated. So they had that sound. That was the second one. Then sometime they ran like an orange amp, and they mic'd it up if they felt like, they ran that as like a little extra hair on the top of the sound. And there was, I think they even ran like, I think an Avalon DI, which later on they just, they didn't use anymore. So basically they had several things, and he just wanted to simplify this. So that was the whole idea, to at least have 2 channels with 2 XLRs, and also an AB switch. So when he switches, he has a wireless that's hooked up to 2 bases, and it's 2 channel. So these 2 wireless can go into this box and also create 2 other outputs. There are like a combination of the RPM and this clean DI. So we created that product, but the heart of it was still the RPM. But it became so popular, this product, the GED-2112, that now we don't even make the RPM. We just tell people that get Geddy's preamp. But we were lucky enough that our original product already had the sound that Geddy was looking for.
Got lucky.
Yeah, it is. And he used it for many years, so he was very used to it. And even in his home studio, which I was fortunate enough to visit, that's how the creative process is. They have a nice couch, and Alex comes in and sits across from Geddy, and they just play with ideas, and Geddy uses our product to go direct. And, that's his setup. So he keeps it simple. See, Geddy kind of a person, he's an artist. He really wants to concentrate on his craft, which is writing the songs and the bass lines and the singing. And he wants to take as little time as possible with the technical aspects of it. So that's why he has a full-time tech, Scully, who takes care of all of that. As long as Geddy's happy, then everything is good. And he's happy. So, yeah, that's how this whole thing came by. And, the other thing what Geddy really liked is, as you know, he's a huge collection of basses. And
yes, I've seen pictures.
And he released a new book on that. And all these basses, they sound different through our product, because our product keeps the essential of this bass. Many times I find that these multiprocessors or digital processors, they put their stamp on the sound. So you can play any bass through it. They all sound the same. So what's the point of owning a $20,000 Fender bass when the $800 brand new Fender bass sound the same, right? So, and Geddy actually is very particular about the different years of jazz basses that he owns, because he finds that they have a certain character and sound, and he can really hear that through the GED-2112. So that's a really high recommendation to our product, that is very transparent.
Absolutely. I saw your interview with Geddy in his home studio. I did, and speaking of that interview, he mentioned he used the GED-2112 in the live performance with Yes at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And I wondered if you knew whether he completely removed his speaker sims and the orange heads and all the other gear as a result of that gig, because I know he just took the 2112.
I cannot speak for the future if they're going to use anything else, but I know at that show with Yes, there was no possibility to use anything else, because he was not the only guest. And it's, as you know, Yes is a big band with a lot of musicians, so they want to keep it simple. So he basically had his wireless with his turquoise blue bass going into the GED-2112, and that was it. So when he showed up to rehearsal, Scully told me that they were really shocked that that's all he has. But then when they plugged it in, they started to play, they were like blown away that, you know, the sound he got, because it was very close and similar to the original Yes sound, which is a Rickenbacker into a Marshall or sometimes SVT, and, you know, overdriven. And obviously it takes up a lot of space on stage and all that. And by the way, this is another little nugget of information. The current bass player in Yes is using our amplifier to get the sound. Trying to think what his name is, because I met him a couple times. You can look it up, but he's a great guy, and we supply him with his. He actually uses amps. Okay, he's using our 1,000 watt amp, but so that's another little piece of information. But Geddy used only the 2112, and it's on YouTube, so anybody can listen to it. It says a tremendous sound. So I don't know what they're going to do in the future, because I know that Geddy is going to work with other people, you know, collaboration. He's going to work with Alex also. But yeah, Rush, as we know it, is not going to tour anymore. But he's going to have other collaborations. So I don't know what else he's going to use, but I know that this is going to always be the core of his sound, because it's reliable, it's in ear, so he can really comfortably sing with that. See, it's very important also that you need to keep your stage volume low when you're a singer.
Absolutely.
So you don't have to strain. And then he plays keyboards and all that stuff. He doesn't have time to deal with all this other thing, you know. So I know that this is going to stay the core of his sound.
For those watching that aren't familiar with the YYZ, this is the pedal version of the Geddy Lee 2112. Right. How did the idea of a pedal?
I wonder if I have one here, a couple, and I always, stuff comes and goes out of my office. It looks like it's not here right now, but yeah, I can get one in.
I was going to ask, how did the idea of a pedal version come about? Was it created at the same time as the 2112?
No, that's an interesting story. You know what? I'm going to get one because it just looks nice. See, I'm asking my vice president to, you know, I'm doing it really high end. But here's the thing. When first we talked to Geddy about the idea of doing like a product with his name on it, he wanted to do only the rack because that's what he's using. We mentioned, oh, we should do a pedal because everybody nowadays uses pedal. And they were really set against it because Geddy has a lot of integrity. He would not endorse anything that he doesn't believe in, and he would not endorse something that he doesn't use. So they said, we don't use pedals. Therefore, there's no pedals. So the way this came about, pedal is coming. So she brought it in, and this is the pedal.
Fabulous looking unit, by the way.
Was that?
Love it. Fabulous looking unit.
Thank you.
Love
and so basically, took us a couple of years to convince them. And the way it went is that I said, I understand you don't use pedals, but a lot of people do. A lot of bass players do. There are a lot of tribute bands, and there are a lot of bands who doesn't maybe play a whole night of Rush songs, but they play one or two. So it would be really prudent and a nice gesture to put your sound into a more convenient format that somebody maybe who has a pedal board could put it on, and then when we play a Rush song, they can kick it in, and then when they're done, they kick it out. Because see, Geddy doesn't do that with his rack. His rack is on 100% of the time. That's his sound. He doesn't change his sound. He changes his sound with his fingers. He actually talked about it and showed it, that, you know, he can get different sounds where he picks and also change the bass, but the settings are always the same. So they were gracious enough to take our pitch on this and say, you know what, you guys are doing so well with the rack, and we understand that a lot of people are not into racks. They don't use racks. They maybe have a small combo, and then they want to get our sound. So, okay, we'll do it. But understand, you know, we don't use a pedal. As long as you guarantee, you know, it's going to sound the same. And of course, I guarantee that because I design all the product, and we sent up the prototypes, and they tried it together with Scully, and they approved it. So there's the stamp of approval. So that's how we came about doing the YYZ, that he finally said, okay, you can do a pedal. So here we are.
Brilliant. And am I right in saying that the drive section from the 2112 is
Absolutely,
the same?
everything is the same. The only thing we don't have on this is the parametric EQ, but I mentioned that he sets up his sound and that doesn't change it. So we got his setting and we set up the parameter, we looked at the parametric EQ and we set up the mid-range here to the same exact frequency. So you don't need to sweep. I understand that if you want to get different sounds, you want to stray from the Geddy Lee sound, then it's a very nice tool. But also don't forget, and this comes to actually what this interview is about, that things are missing from this pedal. There is a reason for that. If you look at, for example, Mercedes-Benz, they have different classes of vehicles. It starts with the A, then the C, then there has the E and the S class, okay? There's a reason for that, because the S class has everything in it. And the A class has the most minimalistic possible way of that you can get from A to B. So this is not an S class. This is, I would say, a C class. It's still going to give you the Mercedes-Benz, or in this case, the SansAmp, but not every little option. Okay, if you want that, you go with the rack, and that's usually for touring musicians, and they want the rack anyway.
That's right.
Because that's very stable. You put it in there. A lot of people we know, they actually have like big power amps. They go run into that directly, and they still use traditional speaker cabinets. But that one has all the bells and whistles, all the XLRs, and switching, you know, of A and B and all that. This one gives you the core of the sound, but that one is tuned exactly what the big boy can do. So when you put one next to the other and set up Geddy sound, there's going to be no compromise, no shortcuts.
Were there any new innovations that were implemented
Actually,
to
yes.
the pedal?
One of the things that Geddy picks his bass, it's almost like a pick with his fingernails. He has really hard fingernails and digs in.
Like flamenco.
And once I
Asked him, can you play soft? And he told me I don't do soft, okay? Because I just wanted to show the listeners the sound difference. Because we have sometimes people call in and they own the Geddy product. They say, I don't sound like Geddy. It sounds farty. So we tell them, look, it's because Geddy picks really hard with his fingers, so you get this attack that some bass players are soft players. So when you play soft, it's going to sound farty through that equipment. So what we introduced on this product is called the tight switch. What it does, it makes the people who play softer, it still make it tighter. It doesn't let the lower strings get hard.
Yeah.
And we sent this up to Geddy to try, and he actually liked it. You know, so we introduced this to other players, but Geddy liked it because what he did, and Scully told me this, is that usually they don't like this kind of a low cut because then you lose bottom end. But since we have the mix control with the deep channel, and the deep channel, not a flat channel that has that EQ curve that Geddy likes, you can blend the two together that you don't lose any bottom end when you use the tight switch. So they were really impressed with that sound. They said that we can see some possibilities that we can use this new sound on some new things that we are doing. So it is a new feature on this pedal that is available only on the pedal right now.
And I've heard in one of your interviews in the past that the products you create, they're not market driven, that you create the products that you'd like to play. So what was it you saw in the YYZ that you didn't see anywhere else?
Originally, it was really a bass product. We started out with the bass driver DI, which is a DI format. I have a bunch of pedals here. I have so many that I don't always find the right one. So right now I'm going to show you another DI that we make. It's same format. This is the Q strip. That's a parametric EQ, but it's the same format as the bass driver, has XLR on it and so on and so forth. We've been making that product for 25 years. And it was like a staple. A lot of bass players, they throw it into their gig bag, and then they have a cool sound that they can go direct. They don't have to rely on the club giving them a very flat, boring sounding DI. So what happened is that since we've been making that for years and years, there was a need for touring musicians to create a rack format of that. And that's how we came about with the RBI, which is rack bass driver DI. And that's how we came up with the first racks. And it was really not market driven, but we listened to people. See, I read every warranty card that comes in. Now it comes in online because eventually you start to see a trend. Okay, we don't jump on it like one guy say like put an XLR on the top here. Okay, because he could say that, and he's the only guy ever said that. Then we know it's not a good idea. But then when it's 20, 30 people or 100 people keep saying the same thing, and it's like maybe something to it. So it's not like being market driven, but paying attention what working musicians say. And that's how I would say that we're trying to stay flexible enough, but I also try to combine it with my own ideas and my own desires, what I want to see in the product.
And was there any part of the pedal design that came out better than you expected?
Better? I don't know. I'm a perfectionist, so for me, nothing is better than what I wanted, but I don't stop until at least on the level that I had in my head. And we do so many little tiny details that people overlook. Like, for example, this actuator. This looks like a mechanical foot switch, but it's not. It has a spring at the end, which is 100-gram pressure that it pushes a Omron switch. Omron is the best switch in the world. Most switches are guaranteed to 10 to 20,000 actuation. This one is guaranteed over 1 million actuation. And all you have, if you're, let's say you're a 300-pound guy, you step on this foot switch, you put the 300-pound on the foot switch, you're still putting 100-gram pressure on the actual actuator. So you can't wear it out. And that's the biggest problem with mechanical switches, and people think that true bypass is the best thing. It's not, because those switches break all the time because they're mechanical. So what we do, we call it the buffer bypass. So we have FETs that switch and we buffer them. So it's, first of all, it's silent. Second of all, it's like you can switch so many times and you're not going to have any misses, you know, or a breakage or clicking noise, you know. So that's one of the small details. And so many other things, like how we protect the circuitry. The jacks we use are much more expensive than most other people that use. The power supply, the power supply jack, the box itself, you know, even like the little thing like a battery clip. You know how many battery clips are like that kind of soft, like wiggly? This one is like really heavy duty, hard. You can bend it. It's very hard and solid. So I pay attention to the smallest detail because I was a working musician myself, and I hated it when things broke, and they broke constantly, you know, always at the worst possible time. So that's another reason that we listen to what musicians say, because then we can get, you know, more input, like what went wrong or what they want to see. So it's not market driven, but we do listen.
I've been looking at some of the features of the YYZ, and as you've already touched on, I couldn't help but notice there's no XLR or parallel outputs. A DI doesn't necessarily have to be built into a unit. Is there any sort of mitigating way that you can still take an output of the unit in the same effect as a DI?
Well, yes. The idea was that this product is actually, it can go direct, but we didn't design this as a DI product. The reason being, because nowadays, bass players have actually more than one pedal. They have a pedal, many times 5, 6, sometimes 10, 12 pedals. So this is actually not at the end of the chain. So if it's not at the end, let's say you have a chorus pedal or you have a compressor, whatever, then the XLR is useless because now you have the chorus and then you have blah and blah and then you need the XLR. So you wasted the XLR for no reason. Beside the fact that it would increase the cost of the pedal, as I said, this is also not the S class, this is the C class of a pedal, which is, by the way, is not the performance is C class. This, the performance is A class. Is the features and add-ons that we don't have the extras. Right. Now, here's another interesting fact. People don't realize this, that all of our pedals output is low Z, low impedance. So you could actually run 100 feet of cable from here to a mixing board, you would have no signal loss. In the old days, it wasn't like that. So it's not necessary to have an XLR to run 100 feet of cable, okay? So you can run this directly to a board, or if you're recording, you can run into a low impedance channel, you're gonna have no problem. It's not balanced, but actually balanced was introduced and developed for microphones. Microphones have 1 to 5 millivolt of signal, which is a very low signal. Mind you, like a bass has around 100 millivolt output, so 100 times more. So when you go to 100 times less and you run long distance, you need that XLR because they actually cancel hum because it's like a humbucking setup. So they put the signal out of phase and they put it back in phase at the other end. So if the individual pairs pick up some hum on the way, then it's going to come back out of phase, the hum, so now they cancel it. But it's not necessary when you have 100 millivolt of signal. It's much more powerful signal, so you don't have to deal with those minute noises because the signal to noise ratio is different. So that's one of the things. So XLRs are kind of overrated at this point because with modern equipment or with even like active basses, that's not an issue. You can run very long cables without any signal degradation. The other thing is that on this pedal is not that much space. We know a company who does modifications to these pedals. They put an XLR in. What they do, they put the XLR right here, but you can't use a battery any longer. So you have to give up something. Exactly.
Choose, yeah.
And I have to remind you that engineering is about compromise. Anything you design or engineer, like let's say a bridge, is going to be compromised between different features. Cost, reliability, how heavy duty you want to make it, because you can make that bridge like 100 times heavier duty, but it's going to cost you more. It's going to be taking longer to build, many other problems. So you try to optimize between features and what you get at the end. So we felt that this is a pedal and this is the best combination of the features and cost, but the sound was ultimately the most important to keep that intact and the same.
That's a very, I guess, ingenious feature. I didn't realize the low Z was on it. I've heard about it in the manual. I presume a lot of your pedals have the low Z. Do any other
all of them
have
that, yes. And as a matter of fact, here's the other fact. You can buy a very workable DI for about $20 to $30. Nowadays, a lot of things, I don't want to mention names, but there are companies who make copies of expensive products and they make it really cheap and they're reasonably good. So if this is what you want the pedal out and the DI, you shell out another $20 or $30 or pounds, and you have it. And you have it at the end of your signal chain. See, here's the other problem. We built some pedals with XLR output, and then people say that I need an effect loop now because my other pedals has to be before the XLR. I look at this pedal. Yeah. I hardly could squeeze in the XLR. I put in a effects loop, I'm done. So there's an endless request. You comply with one thing, and then there's the next request. And the same thing with the parametric EQ. Why can't you put the parametric on it? Look at it. Oh, room. You know? How many more things you want, you know? I mean, it's legit. And as I said, it's available, but you have to step up to the bigger product. So this is a small product. It fits in your gig bag. You know, it is what it is. And I understand that there are people who want more, but you're always going to have that, and you have to be reasonable. You know, how much you can.
It's a signature pedal, so it's built to Geddy's specs, and this is what he wanted out of it.
Approved this. He said it's okay, go with it. So we also have other signature pedals, for example, with Richie Kotzen, our guitar pedal, and people say the same thing. Why don't you have this? Why don't you have that? And we say, wait a minute, Richie wanted this, and we built it for him exactly the way he wanted it. So what you're saying is legit, but it's not what Richie asked. So if Geddy's happy with this, then we are happy. And I understand, and we always open to suggestions. And if, you know, who knows in the future what else could be, you know, available and what else we're going to design. But right now, I'm personally happy with the pedal. It does what I want it to do. And I understand there are other things that it could do, and maybe one day it will do.
So there's some ideas for some special editions there.
Never know.
Maybe.
Never know. We've known to have deluxe version of some of our products, and other companies do that too. So, you know, if a product really have a life of its own, then you start to branch out and have variations of that product, of course.
This is an excerpt from a larger interview of Andrew Barta. For the full interview, please see the details listed down below. A big thank you to Andrew for joining me today, and you can find out more about the release of the YYZ at tech21nyc.com.